How you doing today, YouTube? I got you guys with a special video today. A lot of you guys, probably my most requested video between TikTok, the live stream, my YouTube contents is, Cam, can you please drop a settings video? I know most of you guys are looking for controller settings, but I figured why not go ahead and touch base on everything between the general, graphics, audio, controller, my Nvidia filters, the whole gambit. We're gonna touch base on pretty much everything in today's video. So obviously, as you guys can tell, it's gonna be a bit of a longer video compared to what we're used to. But the point here is why I am gonna give you my settings, like my controller, my sensitivity settings, all that good stuff that you guys always ask me for. I'm also gonna try to get some context on my thought process, some of the behind the scenes background as to why I chose my settings, and to kind of give you that information so you can kind of do your own research and make the most logical decision when you're doing your settings. Like I said, at the end of the day, settings really aren't a one size fits all for everybody. If you go through all the different content creators, everybody's going to have slightly different settings. It's going to look totally different between people. So at the end of the day, I want to give you as much information as possible to every single setting. Obviously, there's some settings that I think are crucial to have, but settings like sensitivity, graphic settings, audio settings, all that stuff, like I said, is not a one size fits all. So I want to give some reasoning behind that and maybe some additional information so you can make the decision for yourself. Now let's go ahead and get into it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you do, don't forget to drop me a like. I'd greatly appreciate it. Leave me a comment. Tell me what you like. Tell me what you didn't like. And make sure if you're not subbed already to hit that button as well. Make sure those notifications are on so you can be first on the scene to every single one of my videos. I drop about 2 to 3 videos on the weekly at the moment. Hope to ramp that up soon. I appreciate you guys for watching. Let's get into the settings, baby. All right, guys, kicking it off here, I'm gonna go very quickly through the general tab. Obviously, most of you guys are here for my controller, audio, and graphics settings, but there are a few things I want to touch base here as well. So field of view, one of the best topics in the Warzone community right now. I'm on PC, I run 120 FOV, I max this out. I know there used to be a rumor flying around that you used to lose aim assist at like 105, 107 FOV. I don't think that's true anymore, but it really is just personal preference. If you're on PC, kick this all the way up. If you want to back off to like 110, 105, whichever your preference is. I prefer 120. I want to have as much as I can get out of my PC. Unfortunately for you console players, I think you're capped at 80. Unfortunately, you don't have an option there. Hopefully we get a next gen slider with Vanguard comes out, but don't hold your heads too high on that one. Advanced settings, I leave this on effective rather than independent. I think it just makes more sense if you look at the descriptions. Effective keeps the field of view setting, whereas independent tones down the field of view when you aimed in. I think that would mess me up more often than not. So I think effective is the way to go here. When we're looking at brightness, a lot of you guys ask me for this setting for whatever reason. I just kind of go through this guide over here to the right, where it does the not visible, barely visible, easily visible. I think you should do the same whether you play on a monitor or a TV. I think this brightness is just based on that and whatever your color settings are on for the monitor or whatever the TV you're running. So I would just kind of do this yourself. I wouldn't copy this straight out of the book. Maybe this is a good starting point for you, but 52 kind of works well for me based on this guide over here to the right. Skipping through some of these settings, the last thing I want to touch base here on this tab is the mini-map shape and the mini-map rotation. I don't know if any of you guys, I'm sure most of you guys know about this setting, but I know I didn't find out about this setting until about a year in playing Warzone, that you can actually change your mini-map shape from a circle, which is the standard right here, over onto a square rectangular shape that you see over here on the right. If you just take a look at the two, I think it makes so much more sense to use the square shape. You get so much more mini-map than you would with the circle, which is obviously a competitive advantage in my eyes. So I don't see no reason not to use the square unless you just have a personal preference for old Call of Duty and using the circular map. I think the square makes so much more sense here. And a mini map rotation, I hope 100% of you guys have this enabled, have the mini-map rotate. So whenever you're looking in a certain direction, as you can see here, the mini-map rotates with it. Whereas if you have this disabled, you kind of leave like a static mini-map. So even if you're looking to the right, the mini-map is still set on one direction. I think it makes so much more sense to leave this on enabled. I think it would screw me up if I had this disabled. I think it stays on enabled default. So most of you guys already probably have it enabled, but just a note, maybe check that. I think it'd help out a lot more, especially when you're playing the game. I think it's just a big competitive advantage in my opinion. I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, that's pretty much it that we have on this tab. Moving over to the graphics tab, a lot of this stuff is PC based for me, but I know console has some of this stuff too, so this kind of applies both ways. Taking a look, Obviously, for PC players, you want to make sure your display adapter is whatever graphics card they're using. If you have a dual graphics card setup, you're gonna have to find another video on that. I have no idea how to run that stuff. But for me, I use a 3080, so this is what I have it set to. For screen refresh rate, obviously you want whatever your monitor is. And this is, I think, applies to console players maybe too if you run a 60 hertz monitor or not. But for me, I run a 1440p 165 hertz monitor. That's where it maxes out at for my screen refresh rate, so that's what I have it set to here. I think all this stuff is kind of default whenever you start off with, but if you run like a 1080 monitor, make sure you switch this over to the I believe it's 1920 by 1080, and then whatever your hertz is, whether it's 155 or 150, 165, 240, whatever you have, I recommend making sure that's correct on here, and then kicking your render resolution up to 100 so it looks like the picture on the right. You don't want to go anymore. You don't want to go any further. I don't think it gives you that much of an advantage. It's going to tax your GPU so much more, and you probably don't want to leave this too down, or your screen's going to look kind of blurry like it does here, and it's going to give you a very bad gaming experience. Scrolling down here, I have a lot of this stuff disabled or as low as I possibly can to get every single frame rate that I can. Obviously, most of you guys know that I game, I stream, I record all off the same PC. I run about 120 to 140 frames depending on what's going on in the map and how much action is going on around me, and I'm trying to max every single one of the frames I can get. Even for console, I know you guys tap out at 60 for last gens, 120 for the new gen. Even so, it doesn't mean you're always getting that 60 or 120. Warzone is a very taxing game when it comes to frames, so having your graphics as low as possible for pretty much all these settings, or everything having disabled, I think makes the most sense. Just to get the most frames per second that you can possibly get. So for me, I have sync every frame, VSync, I have this disabled. I don't know too much about that. I just know I've been told that disabled makes the most sense. It can mess with your frames if you do have it enabled. Video highlights disabled. I do have a low latency mode enabled plus boost to get as low latency as possible. Shaders, nothing to go on about that. Streamer quality, I do bump this up to normal. I have my texture resolution as normal so I don't get too much blur in my game. Other than that, I have all this stuff low or disabled for the reasons I mentioned earlier, just to kick up that FPS as much as possible. Also the shadow map resolution low, disabled, disabled, low, disabled, disabled, disabled. I don't know how many of these things are on console or not, but like I said, I recommend just kicking it down as low as possible for obvious reasons. I don't know much about DLSS. I have messed around with it a little bit based on this guide over here to the right. I've always found that I get more frames when it's disabled. If you guys have more opinions on this topic, I'd love to hear it in the comments if you know a little bit more about the DLSS feature. As far as I know for Warzone, I think it makes more sense to leave it disabled based on my testings and based on some of the stuff I read. But I do know some people do get a gain in performance by messing with these options, so I think that's just something you have to test yourself if you do have an Nvidia graphics card on your PC. Again, depth of field disabled. Motion blur, weapon, world, I think is disabled. I don't like that little blur that you get when you turn. I think it's a competitive disadvantage, and I don't think it looks as good, especially whatever we are on PC or console. Film grain down to 0 for me. Dynamic resolution I have disabled, and then my frame rate is set at 60. I don't really mess with these two. These are just base default settings, and I just kind of leave it how it is. Now, I did forget to mention on the graphics piece, most of you guys always ask, how do I get my graphics how they are? Why do your graphics look so nice compared to the base graphics? I personally use Nvidia filters. I'm going to touch base on that at the end of the video, just because that is only PC based, so I don't want the console players to have to sit through that part of the video. But we will be touching base on that part at the end of the video. I go through all the Nvidia filters I use, and I'll kind of explain them. So moving on to my audio settings, the best way I could describe audio is mess around with it, figure out what works best for you. You can use my audio as a starting point, but everybody's got a different headset. I'm rocking the Astro A40s. I know there's hundreds of headset brands out there ranging in value. Some headsets have better effects, so to speak, or whatnot. So I think at the end of the day, you want to play around with these numbers just to kind of get the best feel for you. Everybody has different ears. So at the end of the day, you know, what works for me might not work for you, and vice versa. But starting off, I do use boost low. I prefer boost low compared to boost high. These are the two settings that you're mainly going to hear. I think boost high is the default. I think most people probably run boost high. I prefer boost low. I just like the more bassy sound of things. In the past, I always thought I could hear footsteps better on boost low when I was testing the two. Recently, footsteps have just been broken left and right, so I'm really not sure which one is better for footsteps these days. I think the game's just broken in general, but I've always preferred boost low just for the overall sound quality of it. So a lot of you guys ask, why does my game sound like that? Because you're not used to it, and it's just simply because I use boost low. My master volume, I have a 45. Music, I have down pretty much as far as I can. Sometimes I like to hear a little bit of music at the main menu, but other than that, I really don't want to hear it while playing the game. So I have this turned down pretty low. Dialogue, turned down pretty low as well. I don't think it's that important. This setting is for your character whenever he's making audio cues, like, you know, killed him or whatever they say. I don't even know. I don't even pay attention to be honest with you. But that's what controls that. Also, when you hear like enemy UAV up above or the guy's voice in the gulag, that controls that as well. So obviously you don't want to have this all the way down, especially, you know, to get the UAV cues or precision airstrike inbound or whatever. You want to be able to hear that stuff, but you don't want to have it too loud to where you can't hear your game. And last but not least, effects volume is the most important slider here that you have. This is most of your game sounds, footsteps, gunshots, grenades, all that good stuff. You want to have this up pretty high. I have it as 80. You can have it all the way up if you want. I just don't want to destroy my ears. I like to hear other parts of the game as well, but at the end of the day, this is what you want to focus on. I think this is what you want to have as high as possible, that your ears can withstand, I guess to say. Juggernaut, don't really think that matters. A lot of you guys ask me why my hit markers sound different than yours. The base hit marker sound is the Modern Warfare, which is the new Modern Warfare 19 hit marker sounds. I prefer the classic. I'm a Modern Warfare 2, Modern Warfare 3 type of guy. I think they sound so much better. I think they sound so much cooler. I'm not sure if there's an option for console or not. I can't remember. But if you're on PC, I just think it makes more sense for me personally to run classic. But I think at the end of the day, this is just personal preference. Speakers, headphones, this is just set the default system device. I think that should be for everybody. One thing I do want to touch on here that a lot of you guys ask, voice chat volume, microphone volume, this is all, again, personal, kind of play with it, figure out what works best. For microphone volume, grab a friend, you know, kind of set this, you know, ask them, hey, do you hear me loud enough? They say no, turn it up. You ask them, you know, am I too loud? They say, yeah, turn it down a little bit, and kind of the vice versa. For voice chat volume, have a friend talk. You know, if you think he's too loud, turn this down a little bit. If you think he's too quiet, bump this up a little bit. And this might be different. You know, some people have louder mics and stuff like that, they don't really fine tune these settings. But at the end of the day, I kind of bump my voice chat volume and my microphone volume up a little higher than probably average, just because my microphone isn't very loud in game for some reason. And my voice chat volume, I want as high as possible, obviously, because you guys know I love those hot mics. Other than that, I think that's pretty much all I have for audio. Word tracks is just a personal preference if you want to hear them in the vehicles. I always kind of have this turned down a little bit so I can hear it some, but I don't miss out on the game sounds and all that good stuff. So on to the part that most of you guys have probably been waiting on, what most of you guys are here for, my controller settings. Kicking it off, for me, I run a BR button layout at default. This is just kind of your default settings, probably what most of you guys play on. The reason I run default rather than, I think tactical, is it tactical? That, yeah. I've tried tactical, I don't like it as much. I run default because I have two paddles on the back of my controller, which I'm gonna show you guys here. I use a SCUF PS4 controller, so I've always been a PS4 guy. Before I switched to PC, so this controller just fits my hands the best. I don't like Xbox controllers. It has two paddles on the back, which you can see here. I use my right paddle, which is on your left side of your screen, for sliding, crouching, and I use my left paddle, which is on the right side of your screen, for jumping, for bunny hopping, and so to speak. So I slide cancel with these two, and I'll leave that right analog stick for melee. If you don't have paddles, I think tactical flip probably makes a little bit more sense. Especially for slide canceling, it makes it that much easier. But just for me, it makes more sense to run default. I prefer that with the two paddles. For any of you guys that do use a PS4 controller, I know you could buy like a paddle extension off of like Amazon for like 15 bucks to get two paddles, or you can get SCUF, Battle Beaver, Cinch. There's plenty of controller brands out there. They're not cheap, so to speak, but I do prefer having the paddles. I think they step my game up just that extra step, especially with slide canceling, because movement's so important on this game. Being able to keep your finger on that right analog stick is key. Next up, I got Deadzone. So this is another setting that's different for everybody. I don't think you should just straight copy my Deadzone. I had this set on 0.06, but this is really just based on your controller. Most controllers, to some degree, have what's called stick drift. You guys have probably dealt with it. What stick drift is if you're not touching your controller, see how I'm not touching my controller. If your arrow is moving to an extent, well, you're not gonna be able to see it, but you can see it in game. If you have a little bit of movement without touching your analog stick, that's what's called stick drift. Deadzone is a setting in game that kind of gets rid of that. So it's the sensitivity of your analog stick to movement. So if you have this set on 0, theoretically, if you move your analog stick just a little bit, it's gonna move. The higher you go, it takes more of moving, it takes more pressure on your analog stick to actually make it move, which gets rid of that stick drift. So like I said, most controllers come with a little bit of stick drift. I think a good starting point is 0.05 and just testing it. So what you should do is just start at a certain level. Like I said, 0.05 is the starting point. Go in game, open up your mini map. If it is moving a little bit, bump it up by 1 to 0.06. If it's still moving a little bit, bump it up by 1. If it's done moving, that's your dead zone that you should be using. For me, it's 0.06. My controller does have a little bit of stick drift, and that's just the perfect number for it to stop moving. I wouldn't keep bumping it up higher. But like I said, this is just something you need to test in game just to get rid of that stick drift on your right analog stick. Next up, sensitivity, ADS sensitivity multiplier. This is what you guys ask me for all the time. I want to make it clear. I'm going to make a point clear here that a lot of people love to go around to content creators. They love to say, hey, what's your sensitivity? What's your sensitivity multipliers? They try it for a couple of days. They can't get the hang of it. They go to another content creator and they ask the same question. The most important thing when it comes to sensitivity, and especially the sensitivity multipliers, is sticking with it for a while. I'm talking weeks, maybe even a month, and actually learning that sensitivity, because that's when you're going to master it. You go around through a lot of pros and content creators. A lot of people have different settings. Some people go all the way down to 5.5, and then they keep their sensitivity multipliers just based on 1. Some people go all the way up. You got Mutex, who plays on 20/20. It really is just personal preference. And at the end of the day, any sensitivity really works. It's just sticking with it, learning it, and mastering that specific sensitivity. So for me, I've always liked to have a decently higher sensitivity. So I rock 9.9. Again, just my personal preference here. I've rocked 9.9 for pretty much my whole time playing Warzone. I don't really think I've changed the setting much at all, unless it was way back at the beginning. And then going through sensitivity multipliers, my recommendation is, especially if you find yourself struggling with sensitivity at all, is to keep at least your high zoom at 1 and your low zoom something lower. I have it on 0.9. So just going through this real quick, your low zoom multiplier is if you're within 3.5 or 3.25, I guess it says right here. So say you're using an SMG with no scope on, you're in a close range fight. The sensitivity multiplier takes whatever this is and it multiplies it. So just say this is 10 and you have a 0.9, that turns your sensitivity to 0.9 when you're aimed down sight less than a 3.25 type of sight. So a VOK sight like a 3.5 would fit into the high zoom, anything less would fit into the low zoom. Essentially, most people had this as a lower value so they could be more, I can't think of the word, just make their close range gunfights easier so you're not flinging your stick all around the place because this is way too high while you're aimed down sight. It gives you just an easier picture to shoot in. So, my suggestion is either keeping this at 1 or lower. I don't think you want to put this up much higher than 1 because I think that's just going to throw you way out of bounds. You're going to have a hard time controlling your sensitivity in close range gunfights if this is over a 1. And then high zoom, my recommendation is a 1 at least. Although I know some pros do run the same, like 0.85. Typically, I like to have a higher zoom, specifically for sniping. For me, I like to be able to drag scope a little quicker than having what the low zoom is, but that's just personal preference. I used to have this on 1.1 until about a month or 2 ago, and I switched it just because I felt like I was kind of all over the place, especially sniping. But this, like I said, this applies to your long range primary ARs, your VLK scopes for Modern Warfare guns, your 3X axial arms, that kind of stuff. That's what this applies to, and sniping. So just keep that in mind. For me, I always want the low zoom to be lower or the exact same as the high zoom, and vice versa. But like I said, just kind of find a sensitivity that works for you. You can copy mine, you can copy another content creators, whoever your favorite is, and just try to run with it for a little bit and get used to it. I think that's your best game plan. And if you just can't get used to it after a couple weeks, just kind of understand what's wrong. Do you think it's too quick? Do you think it's too slow? And kind of work off of that and make slight adjustments just so it's not too big of a thing. But at the end of the day, it's all personal preference. You want to stick with it for a while and you want to learn it, in my opinion. Aim response curve type. I leave this on dynamic. I think this is just the default, I guess, curve type. I think dynamic is what most people use. I know a couple pros use standard, I believe, which is like the exact opposite of dynamic when it comes to aim response. I just leave it on dynamic. I think this is what works for me. I think I've used standard, maybe linear that I'm thinking about, but I've used another one of these and I just didn't like it. Dynamics always worked for me, and that's what I leave it as. Another big topic, controller vibration. If most people probably have this enabled, I have it disabled. I just did this not too long ago and I absolutely love it. Controller vibration really messes with your aim to an extent that you don't really realize until you disable it. It's going to feel weird for a couple of days, maybe even a week, but I highly recommend disabling this learning it, it's going to help your aim so much more not to have that vibration messing with you. If you think about it, that vibration is just adding added resistance to whatever you're doing. So if you're trying to control recoil and you're shooting at someone long range, that vibration is having a negative effect on you controlling your analog stick, in my opinion. So at the end of the day, most people are so used to having this enabled for any game they play, especially like single player games. But at the end of the day, there's no reason to have it enabled if you think about it, because you're already getting audio cues or visual cues. So you don't really need the vibration of the controller. So I highly recommend giving this a shot for a week, getting used to it. And I think you're gonna really like it. Aim assist, I use standard. I've never seen a reason to use anything else unless you really want to disable it. If you're one of those people, I know there's a big debate out there. I just keep it standard. I think that makes the most sense. For PC players, scale aim assist, I have it disabled. I'm not sure if it really matters. I know I've kind of looked at some guides in the past when I switched to PC, and everybody kind of said disabled is the way to go. Maybe just test it out, a couple games between each of them and figure out which one you like better. For me, when I look at these two maps, disabled gives you a better, like a larger picture, whereas enabled gives you a smaller picture. So that's kind of what I went off of, and also looking at a couple other pro settings when I switched to PC. So that's just my idea. Weapon mount activation, didn't really mess with that. I'm sure most of you guys have the same. That's just what I prefer. When it comes down to it, a couple other important settings here. Use reload behavior, contextual tap. I'm sure most of you guys have this on at this point, but basically what it does is if you're picking up a weapon off the ground, picking up someone's loot like a satchel, all you have to do is tap instead of hold square, which makes looting so much quicker. I highly recommend it. Actually, I don't just highly recommend it, I say 100%. You need to have contextual tap on. It makes the most sense. I would not have tap to reload or tap to use on at all. Depleted ammo weapon switch, I don't think it really matters. I just leave this on disable because I don't want my gun switching out of my hands. Armor plate behavior is another important one. I would go ahead and throw this on apply all if you can. If you just give it a shot. I remember I used to have it on apply one. I switched to apply all. I think it makes so much more sense. I mean, at the end of the day, you can just cancel the armor plate animation. If you're running away and you need to fight or whatever, you can just cancel it by pressing triangle again or whatever your plate button is. Apply all just makes most sense because if you're running away and you click it one time, you can get all those plates back on. Whereas if you're running away, trying to slide around corners, making turns, sometimes you forget to hit the triangle button again, and you put yourself at a competitive disadvantage at that point. Whereas you could have avoided that if you just had apply all on. So again, some movement-based stuff. Slide behavior, I think tap makes the most sense, just so you can do quicker slide cancels around the map. I highly recommend tap over hold. Auto move forward, disabled. Obviously, I think everybody should be running disabled on that. This one's really important. The automatic sprint. I know this is kind of a topic. Some people have it, some people don't. I prefer automatic tactical sprint. It makes slide canceling so much easier, so much more fluid, so much more effective. I know some people don't like it, but what I highly recommend is using it for like a week. And once you get used to it, I think it's so much better than having this disabled. Just for the fact that obviously movement and slide canceling is so important in this game, and automatic tactical sprint helps that so much more, as you're not having to constantly tap your button. Whenever you're trying to get out of a bad situation, you automatically attack sprint out of it. I know some people are worried that it's going to mess them up when they try to move a little bit. Trust me, get used to it for a week. It doesn't. If you just want to move a little bit, you'll know how to fix that. It's not a big deal. Like I said, it might take a couple of days, it might take a week to get used to, but I think automatic tactical sprint is the way to go, just for movement's sake, slide canceling sake, and all that good stuff. Two more: vehicle camera recenter, disable it. You should never have this enabled. Basically, when you're driving around a vehicle, this applies mainly to Verdansk players. When you're driving around in a vehicle, you probably notice that if you have this enabled, whenever you look around, after like a second, it automatically brings your camera back. I don't think it makes sense. You just do that yourself if you really want to. Obviously, I think it's annoying if you're looking to the right, trying to keep tabs on a fight going on over there, and then all of a sudden your camera recenters. I think it's annoying. I think you should have that disabled. And then parachute auto deploy, I also think you should have this disabled, unless you're a guy like Tim the Tap Man and you just have problems with pulling your parachute. At the end of the day, this is so much better for landing in early. If you guys know me, I break my legs like 2 or 3 times a stream. It happens, but at the end of the day, having this disabled gives you a much more competitive advantage, especially those early game when you're flying in and you want to get as close to the ground as possible so you can get boots on the ground and loot up so much more quicker than the people around you. Whereas if you have this enabled, it's going to pull your chute, 10 meters, 15 meters up. And then someone's going to beat you to the ground, and then you put yourself at a disadvantage at that point. Like I said, you're probably going to break your legs a couple of times because you're going to go too close to the ground. It's not going to let you pull your chute. I do it all the time. It's just part of the game. But at the end of the day, I think you get more of an advantage using this than a disadvantage. All right. Last but not least, as promised, I'm going to touch base on my video filters real quick. I'm not going to get too deep into this. Like I said, mess around with these a little bit, but just as a base, these are the 3 that I have in my game. First, I use details. If you want to stop the video, just to kind of take a mental snapshot, these are the ones I use. Sharpen is very important, and clarity, bumping all that way, all the way up, HDR, toning, bloom. Next up, I have color. So these are the settings I have. Vibrance, I turn up pretty high, which makes my game so vibrant. I think it's pretty self-explanatory on that one. And then last but not least, brightness / contrast is another filter I use. Exposure, contrast, highlight, shadows, gamma, all this stuff. Like I said, you can put these on your game, make it a base point. Everybody's eyes are different. Everybody's preferences are different. A lot of people do compliment my graphics, but I'll have someone pop in the stream saying, hey, why your graphics look so goofy? Personally, I hate Warzone's current graphics. I think it's foggy, it's dusty, I don't know, it's weird. I don't like the colors. So I took these Nvidia filters off of another content creator and I kind of changed them based on my preferences a little bit. And that's where I got to. So like I said, just pause the video, take a mental note if you have a graphics card and can use Nvidia filters, and just kind of tinker with them until you get to the preferences that you like. Or if you like mine, just leave it like that. Like I said, I like the vibrance of the game. I like to have the colors how they are with these Nvidia filters. I just absolutely love it. I think it's easier to see darker skins like the rose skin, the milsim skin. And I think at the end of the day, you know, it just makes the map less gloomy, which I just prefer overall. Now, I know that was a lot to take in. Like I said before, I didn't just want to give you my straight settings and call it that. I wanted to give you some additional information so you can kind of make the personal decisions for yourself. Because like I said, settings, not a one size fits all. So hope you guys did enjoy the video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did watch till the end and you're seeing this, I really do appreciate you. Again, don't forget to drop me a like if you did enjoy today's video. Drop me a sub if it helped you out in any way. Drop me a comment if I missed something, if you have a question about anything, or if you just want to give me some positive, negative feedback, whatever you got for me, I'd appreciate that as well. Guys, appreciate you again. Have a good rest of your day. Enjoy your week. Go out there and kill it, baby. Peace.